Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here with the TimeformUS preview of the Grade 1 Kentucky Oaks, the feature race at Churchill Downs on Friday, this first Friday in the month of May, the Philly counterpart to the Kentucky Derby, which will be run the next day. And Craig, not 20 horses signed on, but we do have a full field in this Kentucky Oaks. 14 in the main body of the race, two also eligible entrants stuck on the outside. If they get into this race, we'll see if there are going to be any defections that allow Our Pretty Woman and Candy to draw in. Both of them actually AEs with credentials, but even within the main body of this field, Craig, plenty of contenders. It's definitely a top-heavy race when you look at the morning line. Not exactly sure who is ultimately going to go favored, but I could see one of about five horses potentially vying for favoritism in this race.
I could as well. It had to be a tough morning line to make. I know I had a pretty tough time making my selections in this race. I think it's just really evenly matched towards the top and just a good competitive race.
Yeah, a lot is going to be settled in this three-year-old filly division on Friday at Churchill Downs. Before we get into the main contenders, let's take a look at the TimeformUS pace projector for this race. And Craig, while there might not be an abundance of front-running speed in this race, I do think that there are a number of fillies who want to get forward, especially from outside post positions. And you see on this TimeformUS pace projector, a lot of the horses drawn in 10, 11, 13, 14. They're horses that don't want to be that far back in the early going. So I think a lot of these jockeys, especially those drawn outside, could be leaving for position heading into that clubhouse turn. And I wonder if that's going to create a faster pace, sort of like this TimeformUS pace projector is suggesting.
Yes, I'd agree with that. It's not a race that has a bunch of just really confirmed need to lead front runners, but there are a lot of horses that have good tactical speed. And as you note, some of them are drawn to the outside, and not everyone's going to want to be three or four wide around the turn. So I can see things heating up quite a bit as we head into that first turn.
Yeah, the only horse that's probably a need the lead type is the number 7, Fionas Magic. So I think she is probably the most likely early leader in this race, but I don't think she's going to have an easy time of it getting clear of this field on the front end. Well, let's go through this group in post position order, beginning with a long shot drawn down towards the inside, the number 1, Tapet Janali. Craig, she earned her way into this race through achieving some minor placings in the prep races at Oaklawn Park. Really wasn't a threat to win races like the Honeybee or the Fantasy, but she got enough points to get in here, is drawn well towards the inside. She's just going to have to get a little faster and take that next step forward.
She would. I think her best hope in here is yet another minor placing, but at the huge price she's going to be, and given her running style, particularly in the last couple, I could see her just saving ground from the outset. And if things get hot, maybe she could come on for third or fourth, something like that. I don't really view her as a win contender.
The number 2 is Jin Jin, another big price in this race. And kind of like with Tapet Janali, she achieved those minor awards in the New York route to the Kentucky Oaks, finishing third in both the Busher and the Gazelle last time out. Again, not a major threat in those races, hasn't earned particularly fast speed figures, is drawn well, but she's going to really have to take that next step forward, even though she's going out for a powerful Bard in Brad Cox.
Kind of ditto the comments I had for Tapet Janali. She's a horse who's probably going to save a lot of ground, try to make a late run, but she would have to get notably faster to be a contender.
Jin Jin finished far behind. The next horse we're going to take a look at, that is the number 3, Where's My Ring? And this is the Grade 3 Gazelle, the New York prep for the Kentucky Oaks. And she was a convincing winner of this race. Also highlighted here is Regulatory Risk, who's just to her inside. And Where's My Ring did get a very good trip, saving ground early from an inside post. But I like the way she puts this field away in the lane, drawing off. You see big margins in behind her as she comes onto the finish line. And Craig, she ran a final time in this race that compared very favorably, almost just as fast as the Wood Memorial run later this day. So I think the speed figure that she earned for this race, a 110, is totally legit. And it's not like it's the first time that she's run a fast speed figure. Her top numbers of 110 to 111 on the TimeformUS speed figure scale compare very favorably to the likely favorites in this race. And she's probably going to be a pretty good price.
Before that start in the Gazelle, an argument could be made she was the most talented maiden in the country, and she's obviously a maiden no more after that decisive victory. And as you say, the speed figure fits in here. It was backed up by her 2 seconds. Well, one in a maiden race and one while a distant second to Kinza. So yeah, she's one of the main contenders in here.
Yeah, and probably just going to be a bigger price due to the lower profile connections coming into this race. The number four is Regulatory Risk. She was the second place finisher in that Gazelle replay that we just looked at. Obviously, no match for Where's My Ring on that day. Got a pretty good trip, all things considered, but she did take a big step forward in her second attempt against Stakes Company for Chad Brown. And originally, the connections not going to run her in this race to make room for Ways and Means, her more highly regarded stablemate, who was looking like she was on the bubble from a point standpoint. But once they both got in, she was doing well enough that they decided to take a shot anyway.
Yeah, why not? I mean, she ran a good second, no match for the winner, as you note, Where's My Ring? But she did improve a good 10 points after she had been kind of flat in 3 races in a row. And she's still a likely race filly. No reason she couldn't take another step forward in here.
The number five is Torpedo Anna, one of the likely favorites in this race. She is coming out of a decisive victory in the Fantasy last time at Oaklawn Park, coming off a layoff this day. So I think you have to be impressed by how well she ran coming off that freshening since her 2-year-old season. Drew a wide post position, but got into very good position heading into the clubhouse turn, and really just always traveled like the winner this day, drawing off decisively. Kind of like with Where's My Ring coming out of the Gazelle, Craig. I'm not really sure what was behind her, but maybe it doesn't matter given the margin of victory.
No, her 3 out of 4 victories have all come in similar fashion where she's just demolished the field. The one time she was beaten at short odds, she came back on very short rest, just 2 weeks for Ken McPeak. Maybe something went wrong that day as we didn't see her until she showed up at Oaklawn Park. But her speed figures fit and she's very good. And one thing worth noting is she did it from an outside post position at Oaklawn, not something very easy. She was able to work out a good trip, but in large part due to her really nice tactical speed that she's been able to display.
Yeah, and she also got off to a poor start in that goldenrod, had to rush up and was a little wide thereafter. She also held up the start a little bit before the Fantasy last time. She can be a little bit of a quirky filly, so I think she's one that you want to mention with that Kentucky Oaks crowd on Friday. The number 6 is Lemon Muffin, and she finished far behind Torpedo Anna in that Fantasy that we just took a look at. She got off to a slow start, was really out of position every step of the way and never made a rally. She was an upset winner of the Honeybee just prior to that, kind of like Where's My Ring, actually breaking her maiden in a graded stakes race and thus earning her spot in this Kentucky Oaks starting gate, Craig. But I don't love the regression last time, and I really wonder about the quality of that Honeybee that she was able to win.
The Honeybee was not a very strong race. You can see she actually ran a little bit better speed figure in the Fantasy just against much better competition. So she would have to take just a huge step forward.
The number 7 is Fionas Magic. She's that horse that we were discussing with regard to the pace projector, the likely front runner in this race. But Craig, she's got some serious distance questions to answer and also quality questions. She won the Devona Dale, probably getting the better trip than Leslie's Rose, who was the beaten favorite that day. And she came back for her first 2-turn attempt in the Gulfstream Park Oaks last time. It was a disaster. There were multiple horses vying for the Fraudette, and she was one of the first to back out. They're coming back into Kentucky Oaks anyway, but she's going to have to run a lot better.
I would assume she's going to have to try to go to the front. I mean, anything else would be kind of silly. It seems like her only chance, but that chance is pretty slim, in my opinion. She's one who hasn't shown any ability to go 2 turns or to handle pressure, so she's not for me in this spot.
The number 8 is Tarifa, who might be the post-time favorite when all is said and done. We'll see how that plays out, but she certainly is coming in with credentials, having won 4 of her 5 starts. She's been the star of the Fairgrounds route to the Kentucky Oaks, winning her last couple of stakes events down there, the Rachel Alexandra and the Fairgrounds Oaks. Craig, I was a little more impressed by her Rachel Alexandra than the Fairgrounds Oaks last time, even though the speed figure was a little higher in that most recent start. She showed some of those tendencies to get really rank in the early stages of the Fairgrounds Oaks, not settling, and she had to work pretty hard to put away Our Pretty Woman, who did have everything her own way on the front end, but I think Tarifa might have to do just slightly better than that if she's going to win the Kentucky Oaks, and I'm a little concerned about that tendency to get so keen early in her races.
I'd agree. It could get her in trouble in this spot, particularly if the pace heats up like we think. She's probably going to be facing some pressure from her outside as we move into the first turn of this race. And it's not like as the favorite, she has speed figures that dominate. There's some quite a few in here who are as fast or even a little bit faster.
The number 9, Everland, will be another big price in this race. She'll actually be making her first ever start on the dirt in the Kentucky Oaks, so that in and of itself is a tall order. She won the Bourbonnette Oaks at Turfway Park on the synthetic to qualify for this race and got a great ride and trip from post 10, getting over to the inside, saving ground up the inside in the stretch to win that race. I just wonder if dirt is really the right surface for her, Craig, even though she's a daughter of Arrogate. When you look at the dam side pedigree, it's a very turf-oriented George Strawbridge family.
And as the speed figure guy, I'm a little concerned they're kind of low. I know it's a different surface, but as you see in the Derby, there's plenty of horses that have run competitive speed figures on synthetic surface. It's not like they automatically are slower. They just weren't very fast races she's coming out of at Turfway Park.
The number 10 is Into Champagne. She was the third place finisher in the Gulfstream Park Oaks at her most recent start. Almost won the Devona Dale prior to that when finishing just a half length behind Fiona's Magic, who we just discussed. But I know we both felt, Craig, that she should have gotten the job done that day given the trip that she received. And then last time in the Gulfstream Park Oaks, she was in the teeth of a contested pace every step of the way, but didn't really go on with it in the final quarter. And I just wonder if she's a horse that really gets better with added distance.
It certainly didn't seem that way last time. She was up closer than she normally is and had really nothing left for the stretch against two horses who are back in against her here.
Let's take a look at that Gulfstream Park Oaks that we were just discussing. And Ways and Means and Power Squeeze were the top two finishers this day. And Ways and Means is the one that's leading into the stretch. Power Squeeze is the one highlighted first there with that big white blaze on the outside. It was ultimately going to run her down. And Craig, I don't think we're seeing the critical part of this race for Ways and Means because she just got slammed out of the starting gate, shuffled back, made this big, wide, premature move down the backstretch and into the far turn. I'm not going to argue with anybody who says that Ways and Means ran the best race on this day. Power Squeeze, though, got the job done, and I don't think you have any questions about Power Squeeze getting this distance, and she's also supposed to get some pace to close into.
Yes, she is, and her speed figure fits, and yes, maybe Ways and Means ran the better race that day. She definitely had more trouble, but at the end of the day, Power Squeeze still had to go and get her. She had a sizable gap on her, so I think this horse is a real contender in here, and she's one that I have no doubt will be fine at the 1 1/8 distance.
Yeah, she's, I think, 12-1 in the morning line, despite coming off 4 consecutive victories. She's really done nothing wrong, has just sort of won in situations where she wasn't expected to. So I think people are expecting maybe some others that she beat to turn the tables on her, but she's pretty reliable and she's supposed to get the right kind of pace setup. As for the number 11, Ways and Means, the horse that she defeated last time in that Gulfstream Park Oaks, Craig, there's no question that she might be one of the most talented 3-year-old fillies out there. We saw it during her 2-year-old season when she won that debut so impressively, had real trouble on the backstretch of the spinaway, got injured out of that race, and still was able to finish second, just barely beaten. And it was a big ask to come off the layoff going 2 turns in that Gulfstream Park Oaks. And like we said, she might have run the best race, but now second off the layoff, she's got to stretch out to the longest distance she's ever tried, 1 1/8 miles. I'm not totally convinced that she really is a 1 1/8 miles horse, as fast and as talented as she is. She drew a wide post. I just think there are a lot of obstacles for her, again, if it's going to be a short price.
For sure. I'm not one, I mentioned this often, I'm not a big believer in the bounce theory, but the one time I am a believer in it is when horses come off a long layoff and run a very tough race. And her Gulfstream Park Oaks was the very definition of a very tough race. Literally ran hard all the way. Lots of things went wrong. Coming back on fairly short return from that one. So there's definitely some question marks. She's a talented filly, but not sure I'd want to take a short price on her.
Yeah, I guess the good news there is that she didn't look tired at all in that recent workout on April 26th at Churchill Downs, where she blazed 4 furlongs in 46-1. She's a filly that does always train well. And then the two on the outside, Craig, are both coming out of the Ashland Stakes at Keeneland, which was arguably the strongest prep for the Kentucky Oaks from a quality standpoint. A lot of top 2-year-old fillies making the return in that race. We'll take a look at the stretch run of Leslie's Rose and Just FYI, the top 2 finishers coming out of this race. And Leslie's Rose got a great great trip, Craig, saving ground early, able to angle out at the top of the stretch. Just FYI, I think she showed a new dimension in here because she was a little further off the pace than I think the connections wanted her to be after not being quite as quick out of the starting gate as she had been in some prior starts. But she stays on well to get up for second in her first start in quite some time since winning that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. As for Leslie's Rose, who won the race in a 9-1 upset, Craig, I kind of feel like she's a little bit of a last time was the time horse because you got that big price on her that day. She was coming off a bit of a trip in the Devona Dale prior to that. And now, unfortunately, she's drawn all the way out in post 14.
Yeah, I don't want to underestimate that post position at 1.125 at Churchill. When you get out beyond the 10, 11, 12, especially 13 and 14, things can be really tough. Now, an argument could be made that Leslie's Rose should be undefeated. Her trip to back in the Devona Dale was just really bad, one that she should have won that race. But as you said, I think maybe last time was the time. She's really going to have to try to work out a trip from the 14 post.
And the number 13, just FYI, she was the second place finisher in the Ashland, that replay that we just took a look at, Craig. And as I was saying, I liked the way that she was able to actually pass some horses in the stretch, sort of running behind horses, taking kickbacks, something we hadn't seen her do really as a 2-year-old, where she sort of got those wide out in the clear trips. I think she might be moving forward as a 3-year-old. She has reportedly trained very well coming into this race based on pedigree and physicality at a distance. Not supposed to be a problem, but she's another who drew a far outside post position.
Yeah, I think the post position is the big issue. Unlike Ways and Means, even though she also came off the layoff, wasn't really a tough race. I thought she ran well, but it didn't seem like she was all out. She was kind of wide around the turns. So I would expect her to move forward off of that one.
And she did overcome the far outside post position when she won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies and secured a championship last season. Greg, just quickly, the 2 horses on the also eligible list, Our Pretty Woman and Candide. I don't know if you had any interest in either one of those, if they potentially draw into the race. They both have some speed, figure, and class credentials coming in here, but like the horses we just talked about, they'd be saddled with wide post positions.
Yeah, the interesting one for me would be Our Pretty Woman if she gets in, because she is pretty clearly a horse who would be a pace factor and probably make it even a more heated pace than what we are projecting.
Well, let's throw up our picks for this Grade 1 Kentucky Oaks, Craig. And not surprised we're going in slightly different directions here because it is such a wide open race. It looks like we both have some interest in the number 12 Power Squeeze. I think she's the price horse that we both have in there. Definitely one to consider for the exotics, if not on the win end, if she's the right kind of price. But you put the number 5 Torpedo Anna on top, and she was definitely impressive last time.
Yeah, she's been really impressive in 3 out of her 4. And I think that post position she drew gives her an edge over most of the others on the outside. So I'm going to go with Torpedo Anna. I did give consideration to your horse, Where's My Ring? I could have easily had her in the top 2 or 3 in this race. It's just really tough at the top. So I settled on Torpedo Anna. I wouldn't be surprised if she's every bit of that 5-1 on the morning line.
And post position was one of the reasons that I upgraded Where's My Ring in this race, because she's run just as fast as some of those horses that are drawn in post 11, 13, 14 that I was also considering. So she projects to get the same kind of trip that she got last time, where she was just able to save ground from a stalking position under Jose Lezcano. And even though she just broke her maiden in that last race, I think she's a horse that has real quality and is flying under the radar. Don't know if she's going to be all of that 15-1, but I think even a price around 8-1 would be fair on Where's My Ring in this Grade 1 Kentucky Oaks on Friday at Churchill Downs. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.